Now, we touched a little bit on some of this a moment ago with Catherine, but a new study from Citizens Advice Scotland has found that an estimated 1.7 million adults in Scotland are turning down the heat as their bills rise. An analysis from the charity by YouGov has estimated that 1.7 million adults are making that move because they have little or no choice, turning down the thermometer or simply not heating rooms in their home at all in order to deal with rising energy costs. Joining me now, I'm delighted to say, is the former joint head of the UK's Government Economic Service and Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research, my dear friend Vicky Pryce. Vicky, when I was talking to Catherine about this earlier on, there's a row over curious prepaid meters and tariffs going up and overnight tariffs that no longer work or what have you. Are we talking about an energy market with wholesale prices falling quite sharply that simply isn't functioning for anybody?
I'm afraid we are, and it's been going on for quite some time. I mean, remember, it's worse than that. If you look at the whole renewables area, which is supposed to be, of course, producing energy very, very cheaply, in fact, the whatever is produced by those generators has been charged to individuals mostly at the higher wholesale price for gas. So that's been going on for quite some time. So a complete rethink of how the electricity market works is absolutely necessary right now. But I've got to add, it isn't only in the UK. I think a similar problem exists in Europe, and they are looking at it too. So I'm hopeful that when all that is reviewed, we're going to end up with something a little bit more sensible, which actually reflects the cost of producing energy rather than what perhaps the international wholesale price is showing us. And you're absolutely right, of course, that recently wholesale prices have been coming down. And maybe we should look at that as a positive, because if you look at Europe, which has been most affected by this because of the proximity with Russia and the fact they relied so much on gas supplies from there, gas prices in Europe are now back to where they were, which is extraordinary, in September 2021. That is, 6 months before or 5 months before the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. So that should be reflected in all our prices. And for the moment, it isn't. But at least it gives us some hope that when particularly the electricity price cap is looked at again in a few months' time, we're going to be looking at a wholesale market which is considerably more benign than was the case before.
Well, Catherine, my earlier guest from GemWatch was saying exactly that it's not only the market that is no longer fit for purpose, and maybe Grant Shapps needs to sit down with Ofgem and other interested parties to sort that out. But it was also the whole price cap system and the Treasury. So maybe Jeremy Hunt should find time to pop along there. You nodded to my next question in your brilliant answer to my last one, and that is asking you as an economist. It still seems to me that the cost of energy, and whether it be cooking or heating our homes, and that data from Scotland and Citizens Advice, genuinely quite terrifying. That is at the pounding heart still of the economic crisis that we are facing in the UK. Do you see any glimmers of hope like the Governor of the Bank of England did in the latest set of inflation numbers, or are you still deeply and gravely worried?
On the inflation front, I think loads of people have been saying for quite some time that if energy prices stabilise, or other prices like food prices, which unfortunately in the UK haven't stabilised, but internationally they have. In fact, they've been falling for a while. So once they're stabilised, what you might see very quickly is a very substantial reduction in inflation rate, because just think arithmetically. So prices went up very significantly. Let's say they're then stabilized where they are. In a few months' time, when you're comparing a year earlier, then there is no inflation, no energy inflation there. So your inflation rate should drop very, very significantly. What is happening, though, nevertheless, is that what we're seeing in the UK right now is that food prices, retail prices, are going up very significantly because there are loads of costs that perhaps hadn't been passed on before. There is some concern that maybe some of the producers are over-egging it and maybe raising prices a bit too much, and maybe supermarkets are not controlling prices sufficiently. So we still have this problem with food prices. And what we've also seen is that because of that, energy and food what is happening is that the consumer, even though they seem to be going out to eat a little bit more than was anticipated, are reducing their retail spending. So if you look at the data which came out just a day or so ago, we've seen retail spending go down in December. We've seen it go down in the last 3 months in volume terms, and we are below where we were pre-pandemic. So it does suggest to me that the consumer is still very, very careful. But yes, of course, if things improve, and also if their wages maybe start reflecting a little bit more what is happening on the inflation front, we'd see. We've got strikes, we've got everything else going on right now. But if they do, then perhaps things will improve and the consumer household disposable incomes may not drop as rapidly as had been forecast. Remember, we've also got tax rises. They're sort of indirect tax rises, but they are still there. So the consumer is certainly worse off this year than they were a year ago.
Those indirect tax rises, there were a couple of very thoughtful pieces in yesterday's newspapers, and they are irrefutably stealth taxes, in the sense it's the amount of money that you and I and everybody else can earn before we pay any taxes. And I think it was the Times newspaper that particularly said politically very short-sighted of this government, because those who will hurt most are the aspiring middle classes.
Well, it's true. What's happening is that because if you get any wage increases, even if they're not completely in line with inflation, they may well put you into the standard basic rate tariff, which you were not at before. So suddenly you start paying taxes. And if you're earning a little bit more, then you can very, very easily get into the higher 40% tax bracket. And there will be millions who will be in that situation in 2023, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies and others. So yes, that way, what you're finding is that you're ending up with a lot less in your pocket than you had anticipated, and you're paying a lot more tax. That's good, of course, for the government because they're collecting more taxes. But what it means is that even if inflation slows down, but you manage to get some wage increases to compensate for whatever was happening before, you may well end up with a lot less money in your pocket than you would have done otherwise. So the result of that, of course, is that real household disposable income is forecast to decline this year, as it did actually last year too. On that basis, there isn't very much money left to spend on other things, even though obviously the Brits love going on holiday, and they seem by all the evidence there that they have switched from buying things in shops to eating out, which is good news. We're becoming very continental in this country. I'm glad to see.
Changing patterns as people read the economic runes. Vicky, thank you for helping us do that with your authority and wisdom, as always. Lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed. The former joint head of the UK's Government Economic Service and Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research, my dear friend Vicky Pryce, with food for thought. And let me just give a quick reminder that if you weren't with us at the beginning of the programme, do subscribe to our YouTube channel at GBNews, where you can listen again and reflect upon what people like Vicky and Alex Dean and all of my other guests have had to say about the state of the world that we occupy, and whether there's good news just slowly trickling through or not. It's all there on our YouTube channel.